I was the kind of kid in high school who did the entire high school newspaper on the kitchen table and used fake names for other pieces. And I never met anybody like this until 25 years later. I went to do a piece about the Forward, the Yiddish newspaper. And Yiddish, of course, is a dying language, and those who still speak Yiddish, for the most part, are Hasidic and want nothing to do with this formerly socialist paper. And the old man who still did this newspaper did the same thing. He was doing it basically in his little office, and he and 3 colleagues did the whole paper. That was much like the newspaper that I put together in high school. I went to a high school called Pascack Valley High School, and we were the Indians. Even to this day, they're the Indians, though no Indians in sight. And of course, the newspaper was called, wait for it, the Smoke Signal. You get it, communication, smoke signal, Indians. It's amazing it's still legal. I should also say that that journalism for me was 2 things. It was a way of seeing the world and getting out and traveling and forcing myself to meet other people and see other things and to know something. That was the way I could bring myself to know something. I'm not a scholar and didn't have a scholarly temperament. And it was also a way to make a living. You know, I came from a family where I knew I would have to absolutely make a living, if not even support my parents because of illnesses and things like that. And so the idea of setting up shop after college and writing a novel and hoping for the trust fund to kick in, that wasn't going to happen. And so in college, the jobs I had was not waiting on tables, but being a stringer for other newspapers, writing the same obituary 10 times, or writing about a basketball game or a fire or a crime or this or that, anything. I was in, my addiction came early, and I learned a lot from it. I was an intern at the Washington Post, and then I wasn't. And then they said, go away, and the other newspaper in town had folded, the Washington Star, quite a good newspaper. So they didn't need, ex-college students. They needed the best they could grab from the Star. And I went and taught in Japan, which was rather like being a cast member in Stripes. Rice, slice, back and forth. It was a ridiculous job. I came back, I was an intern again at the Post. And I worked very, 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 very hard, and even thought I did okay. I thought maybe I'll land a job here. And what happened was I asked for a meeting with the then managing editor, Howard Simons, who, if you saw All the President's Men, was played by Martin Balsam. And I said, I just 5 minutes, if I could get 5 minutes of your time. And in fact, he took me to lunch, and for 2.5 hours, Howard Simons complained about his job, how Ben Bradlee got all the credit, and how somehow All the President's Men wasn't an accurate portrayal of the great role that he had played, and so on. 2 hours of this, and I'm, 11 years old. I was 21. We came back to the office, and he said, but of course you wanted something, right? He's playing me like a little mouse, which I was. I said, yes, I'd love to stay here and continue working here as a reporter. And he said, well, the Post owns a newspaper in Everett, Washington. Everett, Washington. I said, Mr. Simons, there are no Jews in Everett, Washington. And he exploded with laughter, and when he finished peeling himself off the ceiling, he said, well, you can start on Monday as a night police reporter, which is, as jobs go, is the lowest of the low, and especially at the Post as opposed to a tabloid. But that's where I started. And so I was unbelievably lucky. I started at the Washington Post. It's one of the 2 or 3 great lucky things that happened to me in my career. The other lucky thing was, in about 1987, there was a notice that went up on the board, and it said, we're looking for a Moscow correspondent. And what that always means, I thought, at a newspaper, was that the job had already been filled, but they had to formally put this on the board. In fact, they hadn't filled it because, as it turns out, Russia is really cold, very cold. No one particularly wanted to live there, and the Post was adding this number 2 person, the only foreign correspondent not to be a bureau chief. And so I put my name forward, and because the one subject where I'd done really, really poorly in college was Russian, therefore I got that job. And as it obviously turned out, I went for probably the 4 most exalted, least violent, most positive years in the history of the Russian Empire, which were 88, 89, 90, 91, and I lived there and was a post correspondent there.